Our next guest is brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club, opening Friday, everybody. The course has wintered spectacularly, and it is time now for those groups of 12 or more, the organizer. Time to reach out to the Whistler Golf Club and lock in those tee times for the 2024 season. The prime times are filling up fast. Just for reaching out, you, the organizer, you play for free. Whistler Golf Club takes care of the rest. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups.
Still time to do the two-a-day, too. Ski in the morning, play golf in the afternoon. How about that?
That is quite a double.
Yeah.
You know, Blake, when I went to journalism school, they taught us that sometimes you're going to have to take unpopular positions, that this isn't a place for the cowardly, that you should question groupthink, and that you should stand up for the little guy.
There is a hero amongst us here.
Which brings us to ESPN hockey writer Ryan S. Clark, the lone wolf amongst his 24 colleagues to pick the Vancouver Canucks to defeat the Edmonton Oilers in this second-round Stanley Cup playoff series. And Ryan is in Vancouver, and he joins us now. You're the hero Vancouver is looking for, Ryan. Take a bow.
And either a brilliant genius, a man amongst boys, or you're crazy. Which of the two is more likely to be the truth here, Ryan?
That I regret saying yes to this interview. No. It's interesting because I know we're going to get more into it, but they ask us to submit our picks and you just say, yeah, this is what I think could happen, with the idea that no one really knows for certain. And then next thing you know, you look and you see, oh, Oilers. And you're like, oh, I'm the one person who picked the Canucks. So again, it's interesting because, I mean, look, last year, how many people picked the Florida Panthers to beat the Boston Bruins in the first round? And we saw what happened. And that's the thing, is each and every year, seems like we see those one or two teams that people think maybe they don't get out the first round, or the first rounds as far as they go, and then they go a lot further. So can the Canucks be that team this year? It seems like that's the big question everyone's trying to get answered.
Why did you pick the Canucks, Ryan? Give us the rationale.
Sure. So when you look at how they made it out the first round, it was all about their options, and the playoffs are all about how many options do you have. And so the most obvious one being, look at their situation in goal, from Thatcher Demko to Casey DeSmith to Archer Seeloffs. That's a lot to go through, and yet they navigated all of it and still won a series against the Nashville team that defensively doesn't really give up a lot of chances. The second, again, stems from options, and that when you look at the cast of characters the Canucks have, yes, you know what you're getting from the Quinn Hugheses of the world, JT Millers, Brock Bessers, Elias Petterssons, but when you're seeing players like the Dakota Joshuas of the world be able to supplement that, that is massive. And when you look at the formula that teams have used to win the Stanley Cup in recent years, it's been relying upon everyone. So let's look at the two most recent Stanley Cup champions. The year the Avalanche won it, they had depth everywhere. When they got knocked out the first round last year, it's because they were extremely top heavy, and the Seattle Kraken weren't. You fast forward to this year with the Golden Knights, yes, there were the 9 injuries, and because of those 9 injuries, they didn't really get a chance to play with their full allotment of players until extremely late. And even then, it wasn't until the playoffs when Mark Stone returned. But when you look at the numbers, well, yes, they were able to get goals. It seems like they weren't really able to get as much from their supporting cast defensively as they did the year before. And when you look at how those two teams have won and lost, and you look at the Canucks, you think between the goaltending and the scoring options, on top of just all the other changes they've made to be consistent in the regular season, there's a belief that, okay, maybe this could be the Canucks' year to get to the Western Conference Final.
I would have been part of the majority if I was an ESPN employee. I've got the Oilers in 6 with an asterisk, and it kind of folds into what you're talking about here, in that I think the Canucks have theoretical depth, but they haven't shown a lot of it. And so my asterisk is, hey, if the depth shows up, yeah, we've got a different series. I'm making my prediction based on what I saw from the series versus the Predators. But if guys like Höglander and Pettersson decide they're going to be a part of this playoff, then that changes the equation entirely. Do you see the Canucks depth being there already, or are you more of that mind that it's just due to come?
Somewhere in the middle, that while
Yeah.
you've seen elements of it present itself in the first round, you could still see more in round two. And it's interesting you bring that up because that was one of the big questions facing the Edmonton Oilers last season in the playoffs. So go back to that second round matchup against the Vegas Golden Knights. In the games the Oilers lost, if it wasn't McDavid or Draisaitl who scored, the only non-McDavid Draisaitl Oilers to score were Zach Hyman and Warren Foegele. And it led to an offseason of questions of how do you get more offensive production, not only just secondary and tertiary, but how do you get it in those games where there might be a loss, but at least you can look back and say, you're able to do X, Y, and Z. And game one of that series is a great example. Yes, Vegas wins 6-4. There's all these questions about, okay, what could they have done better defensively? Well, Leon Draisaitl scores 4 goals, and it was an all-time great performance. But when you look at everyone else in the lineup, they were really able to not only do what they needed to do, but they were able to have games in which they kept guys like McDavid off the board, which is huge, whether it be even strength power play or whatever. So both of these teams have questions about depth, and that's just it. Is like, unless you're one of those teams that has won a cup and it's proven, and as we saw with Vegas and Colorado the last 2 years, and even Tampa when it tried to win a third in a row, just because you may have answered the questions the year before doesn't mean this current season you have it all figured out.
What kind of feedback have you gotten being the lone wolf at ESPN picking the Canucks?
So completely honest, didn't know what to expect. And then all of a sudden you start getting text messages from people in Vancouver who they're like, you're the one who picked the Canucks. And you're just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then you start looking at social, and then next thing you know, it's another. And it's like, I don't know who Ryan S. Clark is, but I like him already. To when are we going to build the Ryan S. Clark statue? It's like that was something. Another funny one was, I can't wait to see a Ryan S. Clark jersey walking around game one, which, like, again, that was interesting.
If we see that, oh my goodness.
The funniest two have been, someone tagged the mayor and said if the Canucks win this series that I should get a key to the city, which, like, that's just wild.
All of that is really good.
And then the best one, and my wife died at this. I forgot the person who tweeted it, so I apologize. But what they did is they took this video of someone saying, like, this is my favorite thing of all time. I think about this every day, almost 5 minutes a day. And it's the prediction zoomed in on me predicting the Canucks. And then it goes to my Twitter profile, and then it's like my face, and it's like, this is my favorite thing. And it's like, I'm glad someone feels that way, because, like, maybe my wife is the only person on the face of the earth, and even then it's like on odd number days. But it's been interesting just to see the reactions. But no, it's extremely kind of people to say nice things and all that. But yeah, it's just, at the end of the day, you have to make a pick, and it's one of those, you look at the Canucks and think there's a lot of reasons why this could happen.
Hey, I watch NFL Countdown in the Monday night preview show on ESPN, and I know they make picks there, and there always seems to be someone who goes, oh, I'm going to pick the other team just so it's not a clean sweep. Has anyone at ESPN reached out to you and said, thank God it wasn't a clean sweep? Thank you for being the one who picked the Canucks?
No, not at all, because it's one of those, they want you to make the pick that you think makes the most sense, regardless of what that might be. And yeah, it's one of those, because Steve Levy did the same thing. Like, he chose the Bruins over the Panthers, and he was the only person to do it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's one of those, like, it happens, and there's not like anyone who goes to you and says, are you sure about this or anything like that? Like, you might have people reach out, like, when you submit your picks, like, your editors go like, this is horrible. Why is it horrible? Well, because I picked this other team to win and you went against me. And it's more kind of funny stuff like that. But there wasn't like anyone calling and emailing being like, oh, you picked the Canucks. It's just like, yeah, here are the picks. And then Canucks Twitter did its thing. And it's like, okay, I get it now. Because, like, Canucks Twitter exists. Like, you've seen it from afar, but then to, like, actually see it up close, you're just like, yeah, I get it now.
And you didn't pick Canucks in 4, like you were sane about it at the very least, and said Canucks in 7. And the good news is, Ryan, is that if you're wrong, this will all be forgotten very quickly. If you're right, again, your legend just grows. It's really a no-lose proposition for you here at this point.
Legend is too strong of a word, so let's stay away from that. But when you look at all of these series at this point, 6 or 7 make a ton of sense. And it's interesting because you think about Dallas and Colorado last night. And so going through the numbers, would you believe that's the 6th straight game one the Dallas Stars have lost? And in all those series, they've gone a minimum of 6 games. And at this point, and we talked about this so much in the first round, every team is spending to the cap. every team is pouring resources in. And when you have the margins that tight, to expect a 4 or 5 game series, not saying it can't happen, but when you look at the way teams are constructed, it seems like 6 or 7 is the way to go, especially when you look at the cap, but more importantly, and with the case of the team like the Canucks, even what we saw with the Golden Knights last year, forget having 2 goalies. If you can have 3, that's just another example of how deep these series can go.
But I also hope the last night was a good indication, guys, that that the second round might be a little bit better. Like, of all the first rounds that we've seen in recent years, that was maybe the most vanilla first round.
It was a terrible first round. Even Kelly Rudy said it on Hockey Night.
Yeah. But that was a pretty spectacular night last night. So maybe this is a good sign.
Carolina, New York, what a hockey game.
Yeah.
That was absolutely extraordinary. Hey, Ryan, did you put any stock into the Canucks being 4-0 against the Oilers in the regular season, or majority of the games being so long ago that not relevant to this?
It's hard to say how much of a role that's going to play. And sorry to keep coming back to this, but we just saw the answer to that question last round. Because think about it. The Winnipeg Jets came in 3-0 against the Avs. It outscored them, 17-4, 17-8. Either way, they had 17 goals. And the question was, how can the Avalanche keep pace with the Winnipeg Jets, only for the Avs to not only win in 5, win the last 4 in a row, and after giving up, 7 goals in game 1, I believe Winnipeg, and going into game 5, hadn't even scored 7 goals in their next 3 games combined. And so it just goes to show how much things have changed. You're better at even look at Vegas and Dallas. Like, until last series, the Vegas Golden Knights had greatly struggled with the Dallas Stars. And believe the statistic, and apologies if I get this wrong, was after game 2, they had lost 6 in a row to the Vegas Golden Knights and 9 of the last 11 between the regular season and playoffs. And yet they won a 7-game series. And so while there might be something to say in terms of that experience, understanding characteristics, the familiarity of one team versus the other, it's also so different just because, look, the playoffs, they cause teams to look at things a bit more strategically. You have different lines, different combinations, different personnel. And so while, yes, it's lets you know what the Canucks can do against the Oilers, it's not necessarily this blueprint for what's going to happen because, again, you just don't know in the postseason what other teams are doing until you play them.
Are you a believer that all the pressure's on Edmonton here and the Canucks can play loose and not be as hung up as the Oilers are?
Honestly, and this is going to be the dumbest thing ever said on this show, there's pressure on everyone because this is Canada. Like, if we're having an honest conversation, like, this is Canada where, let's face it, we've talked for how many years now has this nation not won a Stanley Cup in terms of seeing one of its teams? And for these two teams, even when you look at like what's in front of them, no matter who wins, there is going to be pressure because of that. And not only that, but it's other things too, because like the Oilers, it's the pressure for all the obvious reasons. McDavid, Draisaitl, can you win? How do you do it in this era where like Colorado's figured it out, Vegas has figured it out, Dallas is trying to figure it out. But with the Canucks, there's even pressure in the sense of like, well, yes, this is a big step forward. How do you make sure that this is now going to be the norm going forward? Because how many teams have we seen in the past miss the playoffs for X amount of years, get in 1 year, go to the second or third round, and it looks like, okay, is this going to be the standard, only to drop off? And then you're left asking, well, what happened? And it seems like if you're the Canucks, that's the biggest question for you to answer when this postseason is done. So yeah, there's no, at least from the perspective I have, there's no one team is more pressured than the other. No, like there's pressure on both, because like anyone who thinks that the Canucks are here because they got a participation trophy, no, they're extremely talented. The front office rebuilt and revamped an entire defense. You have a head coach that you brought in that, and it feels like very few people outside of Vancouver realize this. Rick Tocchet's 36 games in charge. They won 20 of them. Like, that is huge. And like, yes, you think about, well, they did something similar under Bruce Boudreau and his, 1 year, and then the next full year we saw what happened. But with the Canucks, there's pressure regardless for all those different reasons, not just this series.
The last Canadian champion was 1993. It was almost that. It was longer since the last time these two teams met in a playoff series. Which I'll leave you with my final question: is are you worried that the Kraken and the Canucks will never face each other in the playoffs? Because if it takes 31 years or 32 years for the Oilers and Canucks to get together, my goodness, maybe the Kraken and the Canucks will never play each other.
But see, this is the hard part about it. Like, for geographical purposes, it's understandable why people want a rivalry because it's close and it's just all that. But at the same time, there's no guarantee that that's ever going to happen, because like we think about what some of the most historic rivalries have been. Like, yeah, back in the day, it was more geographic, but as the league has expanded, like whoever thought that Denver, Colorado, and Detroit, Michigan would ever have a blood feud about hockey?
Yeah.
But in the 90s and early 2000s, like it was the rivalry. Or how even like Boston and Florida has developed a rivalry.
Canucks in Chicago for a few years, right? Canucks in Chicago and nowhere near each other. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, even Chicago and Pittsburgh to some degree, because like those were the two teams going at it in that decade. So it's hard to say, because like, well, yes, you won it there, and you're going to have regular season matchups in terms of what could happen in the postseason. Who's to say? Because now with the Coyotes moving to Utah, like there's this natural inclination of maybe them and the Avs are going to have this rivalry, when for all we know, their rival could end up being the San Jose Sharks, the Dallas Stars, or the Columbus Blue Jackets. Again, we just don't know.
Well, Ryan, we admire your bravery. We thank you for coming on to defend this most unpopular position. Hope you have a blast here in Vancouver, buddy. Thanks for the time, and enjoy the city and the series.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.